The sun dipped low over Elmwood Estates, casting long shadows across manicured lawns that hid secrets sharper than garden shears. Jeffrey Lambert wiped sweat from his brow, admiring the fresh sod he'd laid that morning, his first real stake in this cookie-cutter paradise. But as dusk settled, a figure lurked at the fence line, her silhouette rigid with purpose, clippers glinting like accusations. She moved with the precision of judgment, unseen eyes narrowing on the one yard that dared to bloom differently. Snip. A single cut echoed in the quiet, unraveling more than pipes. Water surged, silent at first, then roaring like a vengeful tide. What began as a petty grudge would drown an entire block in chaos and expose the rot beneath the neighborhood's pristine facade. In a place where green meant belonging, one man's pride became the spark for a flood of buried truths. Jeffrey Lambert had always dreamed of roots that ran deep, the kind that anchored a man against the world's pull. At 42, after years scraping by in cramped city apartments, he poured his savings into a modest two-story colonial on Willow Lane in Elmwood Estates. The neighborhood gleamed under Florida's relentless sun, identical driveways lined with sedans, mailboxes painted in HOA-approved pastels, and lawns clipped to surgical perfection. For Jeffrey, a black architect who'd clawed his way through underfunded schools and skeptical clients, this house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was proof. Proof that diligence could carve space in a world that often measured worth by shade. He arrived on a sweltering July afternoon, the moving truck groaning under boxes of blueprints and family photos. Unpacking felt like unspooling a lifetime. His late mother's quilt draped over the couch, his daughter's artwork pinned to the fridge. Jeffrey's hands, calloused from drafting dreams on paper and now tending soil, coaxed life from the yard. He installed sprinklers along the fence, their rhythmic pulse a heartbeat for the parched grass. Neighbors waved from afar, polite nods over hedges, but Jeffrey sensed the undercurrent, the way eyes lingered a beat too long on his skin, his SUV with out-of-state plates. Then came Karen Whitaker, the HOA's unofficial sentinel. At 58, she patrolled Willow Lane like a border guard, her blonde bob impeccable, her clipboard a scepter of suburbia. Karen's home sat at the cul-de-sac's crown, a shrine to conformity with flamingo lawn ornaments frozen in eternal vigilance. She'd volunteered for the board a decade ago, rising through ranks by enforcing rules with the fervor of a convert. Fines for untrimmed hedges, warnings for unapproved bird feeders, her ledger was gospel. But beneath the bylaws lurked something sharper, a quiet conviction that Elmwood's harmony depended on sameness, and sameness in her mind wore certain faces. Jeffrey's first brush came innocently enough. A week in, his sprinklers misted a faint arc over the shared fence, droplets kissing Karen's prized azaleas. She appeared at his door the next dawn, though he only glimpsed her retreating form, a violation notice fluttering in the mailbox like a summons. Excessive water usage, it read, stamped with her looping script. Jeffrey shrugged it off. His system was code compliant, measured to the drop. He adjusted the nozzles anyway, tilting them inward, a small concession to peace. But the notes multiplied. A citation for non-standard mulch. His was cedar, one shade too rustic. Another for parking his truck overnight. Neighbors did it weekly. Each arrived with Karen's scent of lavender and disdain, slipped under his mat while he slept. Curiosity gnawed at him. Why him? The block's other lawns, tended by white families with kids' trampolines and half-deflated pools, escaped such scrutiny. Jeffrey pored over the HOA handbook at his kitchen table, the pages blurring under lamplight. Buried in fine print, discretionary enforcement for aesthetic harmony. Harmony. The word twisted in his gut, echoing boardroom dismissals, rental rejections veiled as fit. He confided in his journal, words spilling like rain. This isn't about grass. It's about who gets to grow here. Nights stretched longer, sleep fractured by the whisper of wind through leaves, as if the yard itself braced for storm. Little did Jeffrey know, Karen's gaze had hardened into resolve. His sprinklers, those defiant veins of green, mocked her order. And in the quiet hours, when the neighborhood slumbered in its illusion of equity, she plotted her correction, one snip at a time. As August baked the air into a haze, Jeffrey's unease thickened like humidity before thunder. The violation slips evolved into a ritual. Monday mornings brought fresh indictments, Karen's pen slashing across recycled paper with accusations that grew flimsier yet more pointed. Unauthorized irrigation extension, though his setup mirrored the model home's diagram. Visual disruption to communal vista. Code, he suspected, for the sight of a black man wielding a hose under the midday sun. He attended the monthly HOA meeting in the community center, a sterile room smelling of stale coffee and veiled hostilities. Faces turned as he entered, smiles stretched thin over questions. How long had he lived in the city? What firm did he design for? Probes disguised as pleasantries, but he felt the subtext, the invisible ledger tallying his otherness. Karen presided from the head table, her voice a measured cadence as she tallied fines. When his name surfaced, Mr. Lambert's persistent noncompliance. The room shifted, a collective inhale. She detailed his infractions with clinical detachment, projecting photos of his yard onto a screen. Sprinklers caught in mid-spray, mulch bags stacked like evidence in a lineup. Whispers rippled, troublemaker, doesn't fit, and his pulse hammered, fists clenched under the table. He raised the hand, voice steady. But no, the prompt said no dialogues. So he sat, absorbing the barrage, the way her eyes skipped his like a glitch in the Matrix. The vote was swift, an escalated fine, $500, due in 7 days. Driving home, the subdivision's gates loomed like jaws, swallowing him into isolation. The injustice festered, a slow poison seeping into his days. Jeffrey doubled down on perfection, rising before dawn to rake leaves that weren't there, pressure washing the siding until it gleamed whiter than surrender. His daughter visited that weekend, her laughter a brief balm as they barbecued on the patio, ribs smoking low and slow, the scent curling over the fence. But even then, Karen's shadow intruded. A drone buzzed overhead, her neighborhood watch toy snapping aerial shots. By evening, another notice. Open flames in restricted zone. Jeffrey's jaw tightened, the grill's embers mirroring the spark in his chest. This is war by paperwork, he thought, crumpling the paper. He researched online, forums buzzing with tales from other black homeowners, targeted audits, anonymous complaints, the subtle siege of belonging. But yielding felt like erasure. He poured himself into the yard, upgrading the sprinklers with eco-timers, their gentle whoosh a rebellion against the drought of acceptance. He confided in a coworker over phone, voice low in the garage. The toll of vigilance, the exhaustion of proving worth daily. Nights blurred into vigils, staring at the ceiling fans whirl, replaying Karen's presentations like indictments. Her motivation crystallized in fragments. Glimpses of her at block parties, arm linked with the Wilsons next door, her laughter ringing as they swapped stories of those people ruining values elsewhere. Never here, of course, until Jeffrey. To her, he was the fracture, the dark vein in marble, demanding excision. Tension coiled tighter as September edged in, storms brewing offshore. Karen's patrols intensified, her sedan crawling past at odd hours, headlights sweeping his windows like searchlights. Jeffrey installed a ring camera, footage capturing her pauses at the fence, clipboard poised, gaze fixed on the sprinkler's copper gleam. One entry, grainy at midnight, her gloved hand testing the soil as if his earth offended. Paranoia or pattern? He cross-referenced dates. Fines spiked after his weekend gatherings, the faint bass of R&B leaking over hedges. The emotional stakes mounted, a vice on his heart. This home, his sanctuary, twisted into siege. Pride warred with prudence. Fight back, risk escalation. Comply, invite contempt. As thunder rumbled distant, Jeffrey watered the lawn one last time, droplets scattering like tears. He didn't see her approach that twilight, clippers concealed in her tote, resolve etched in the lines of her face. The cut was coming, and with it, a deluge that would wash bare the neighborhood's fragile lies. Twilight bled into night as Jeffrey retreated indoors, the screen door sighing shut behind him. Exhaustion pulled at his limbs, but sleep evaded, chased by the day's echoes. Karen's drone whirring like a hornet, the fine's weight in his pocket. He paced the kitchen, blueprints forgotten on the counter, mind replaying the meeting's undercurrents, the way heads nodded in sync with her verdicts, a course affirming his exclusion. Outside, the sprinklers hummed their final cycle, oblivious sentinels misting the border. Karen emerged from her azalea thicket, the clippers cold in her grip, their blades honed that afternoon on errant rose stems. Her heart quickened, not with guilt, but righteousness. Jeffrey's yard had become a blemish, his presence a ripple disrupting the pond's still surface. She'd watched him for weeks, the way he tended it with hands that didn't belong, green thumb or not. The bylaws were clear: uniformity. And uniformity demanded sacrifice. She slipped through the slats, shadow merging with dusk, breath shallow as she knelt by the main line. The pipe gleamed innocently, plastic veins pulsing water. One snip, clean, decisive, and the world shifted. Pressure built instantly, a groan rising from the earth like a beast unchained. Water erupted in a geyser, wild and unrelenting, spraying skyward before cascading in sheets. Karen recoiled, stumbling back as mud sucked at her loafers, the flood devouring her gloves. She fled, heart slamming, azaleas trampled underfoot, but triumph flickered amid the panic. Order restored, at any cost. Inside, Jeffrey froze at the roar, a primal bellow shaking windows. He bolted outside, bare feet slapping wet grass, the beam of his phone's flashlight slicing chaos. The yard transformed, sprinklers wrenched apart, water sheeting across the lawn in a biblical torrent, breaching the fence like a breached dam. It poured into the street, swelling gutters, creeping toward neighbors' thresholds. Car alarms wailed distant as the deluge lapped at tires, engines sputtering in shallow pools. Lights flicked on block wide, silhouettes in doorways gaping at the maelstrom. Jeffrey waded in, hands plunging into the froth, fingers tracing the severed line, clean edges, deliberate malice. Rage surged, hot as the spray, mingling with disbelief. This was an accident, but assault, etched in sheared plastic. The flood accelerated, a river carving Elmwood's veins. Down Willow Lane, it surged into basements, swirling family heirlooms and eddies. Garages filled like sinking ships, tools bobbing amid oil slicks. The Wilsons' minivan floated lazy circles in their driveway, bumpers kissing mailboxes. Sirens king distant, red-blue pulses dancing on waves. Jeffrey sloshed to higher ground, phone dialing 911, voice lost in the din. Though no words escaped, only the frantic press of buttons. Neighbors emerged, robes clutched, faces pale masks of accusation turning to him, the epicenter. Whispers cut sharper than shears. His fault. Always knew he was trouble. The injustice crested with the water. His sabotage pinned on him, the black man at the flood's furious heart. Karen watched from her porch, elevated by the cul-de-sac slope, the deluge a dark mirror to her deed. Regret warmed in, tardy and thin, as her own yard drowned in runoff, petals pulped to paste. But beneath it, defiance. He'd pushed too far, claimed too much. The chaos peaked, a neighborhood unmoored, vehicles adrift, foundations groaning under the weight of submerged sins. Jeffrey stood amid it, soaked to bone, the current tugging at his ankles, a man unbowed, yet battered, as the waters raged their revelation. Dawn broke gray and sodden over Elmwood Estates. The flood's fury ebbed to sullen puddles mirroring the sky. Cruisin' raiders pumped streets dry, their hoses snaking like afterthoughts to Jeffrey's ruined line. He surveyed the wreckage from his stoop, lawn a churned sea of mud, fence sagging, the block symmetry shattered into skewed driveways and sodden heirlooms piled curbside. Insurance adjusters swarmed by noon, clipboards echoing Karen's, but their questions veered toward facts, not fault. Forensics traced the cut, deliberate, fresh, and whispers led to her, a neighbor's dash cam catching her silhouette, gloved and purposeful. The aftermath unfolded in layers, peeling back Elmwood's veneer. Police arrived mid-afternoon, their cruiser idling before Karen's perfect facade, now marred by silt-streaked steps. She emerged, composure cracking like dry earth, but the evidence mounted, tool marks matching her shears, retrieved from her garden shed. Charges loomed, vandalism, reckless endangerment, the flood's $200,000 toll a ledger against her. Neighbors once allies in her patrols averted eyes as she was led away in cuffs, her empire reduced to a squad car's rear view. Jeffrey watched from afar, a hollow victory churning in his chest. Justice, yes, but born of destruction, his dream yard a casualty. Repairs came slow, funded by a hastily convened HOA emergency fund, irony thick as the mud. Jeffrey rebuilt methodically, replanting sod with roots dug deeper, sprinklers fortified against future trespass. The block healed unevenly, some lawns green faster, others scarred with water lines like high tide marks. Fines against Karen piled, her board seat vacated amid resignations, and the handbook revised with clauses on bias training. Perfunctory nods to equity, drafted in boardrooms still heavy with old air. Jeffrey's story rippled outward, shared in local news clips and online threads, a cautionary floodlight on suburbia's shadowed biases. Black homeowners from afar messaged solidarity, their own tales of targeted shears and silent sieges. Yet the true deluge was internal, reshaping Jeffrey's core. He walked Willow Lane at dusk now, not with vigilance but reclamation, pausing at fences to chat with wary neighbors, his presence a quiet insistence on shared soil. The injustice lingered, a watermark on his spirit, how one woman's grudge steeped in racial reflex could unmake a community. It echoed broader currents, redline maps redrawn but not erased, HOAs as modern gatekeepers enforcing invisible covenants. Jeffrey journaled by lamplight, words a dam against despair, floods recede but the channels they carve endure. We rebuild or we drown in the undertow. In the end, as sprinklers whispered anew across Elmwood, Jeffrey stood taller, his yard a testament not to conformity but resilience. What if one cut could unleash such waves? How many unseen snips carve our world daily? In the quiet after storm, ask yourself, whose green are you willing to drown to keep yours pristine? The answer might just flood the lives we've let take root.